We are live on Locked On Pirates today to ask questions. That's what I want you guys to do. It's an off-season Q&A here on Wednesday, November 8th, as we're live on the Locked On Pirates podcast, brought to you by FanDuel.
You are Locked On Pirates, your daily Pittsburgh Pirates podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome back, everybody, to the Locked On Pirates podcast here on the Locked On Podcast Network. My name is Ethan Smith, your host of the Locked On Pirates podcast. Sorry about that. You can follow me on Twitter right there at MVP_Ethan because I'm always bringing you news, reactions, analysis, and opinions about everything going on in the world of the Pittsburgh Pirates. Today's live stream and episode is brought to you by FanDuel Sportsbook. Make sure you go to FanDuel.com/lockedon to redeem $150 in bonus bets on any $5 moneyline bet, but more on them later. We are live once again here on the Locked On Pirates podcast, and it's a Q&A episode about the offseason. Ask me questions about the 2023-2024 offseason. And while we wait for some people to get in right here at the beginning of the live stream, I did ask the other day, what should we talk about? And that was actually yesterday. And I did my off-season wish list. But you guys actually asked some pretty good questions about some things pertaining to the Pittsburgh Pirates offseason. You asked a lot of very good questions. You gave some very good opinions on what you guys think the Pirates should do in this offseason. And I'm sure that I'll be getting plenty as well here on the live stream. And we're going to start with Pit Panther, one of the very loyal listeners of this show, who commented under what should we talk about today, which was yesterday. And he said, I think yesterday, which would have been 2 days ago, Rhys Hoskins didn't get the qualifying offer. Should the Pirates try to get him? His glove work leaves a bit to be desired, which with Cruz could be an issue. And coming off the major injury, it's a question. But when he's healthy, he rakes. And B, if yes, what is your offer to Hoskins? Well, yes, I talked about Rhys Hoskins yesterday as a guy that I think the Pirates would love to have on this roster. But again, I do think the injury is a major question mark for a guy like Rhys Hoskins. I think it's something the Pirates are going to have to monitor throughout the entire offseason. I don't know if he's going to be one of those guys that signs right away. I don't know if he's going to be one of those guys that it takes a little bit for him to sign, and there's a little bit of a market that has to be built up for a guy like Rhys Hoskins. But I do think if the Pirates can get him, I think it is something that they should try at least with Rhys Hoskins. Now, much like I talked about with Eduardo Rodriguez, you don't want to get in a straight-up bidding war for the guy because you're just asking for trouble at that point. And I like that you mentioned the glove work as well, because the Pirates are going to have to find a guy who can play defensively over at first base with a guy like O'Neal Cruz, who's still kind of learning how to play the shortstop position. That was something we were hoping to find out in the 2023 season until he was injured for the entire year with his leg injury. But if they do indeed go after him, the offer gets very interesting because you really don't know how much money a team or the Pirates even would be giving a guy like Rhys Hoskins. And when you look at Rhys Hoskins and what he offers you and what kind of player you're getting from him, before the injury, you knew you were getting a power-hitting first baseman that can at least be adequate defensively over at the position. Now you really don't know. Now on Spot Track estimations, which I talked about a lot yesterday on my show when I was talking about my wish list, he's estimated to get about $20 million. I just find that to be false. I don't think he's going to get that much money unless a team overpays for him, which the Pirates will not overpay for a guy like Rhys Hoskins. And when you say $20 million a year, I think it would be more in the realm, Pit Panther, of probably 3 years, $45 million. That would be what I would be comfortable giving a guy Rhys Hoskins probably with an option, like a club option there at the end of the contract, right after that second year, because you want to at least give him a year to ramp himself back up. And then obviously in 2025, if he was to sign that kind of deal, I think that you would really, really want him to at least show you something year one. And then if he still doesn't show you something in year two, you just opt out of that deal. And I think that that's where a lot of this can get into is what do the Pirates go after as far as the first base position? And that's where Donna Hine comes in, where she says lack of a first baseman, lack of steady right field. And she also says, how about Shelton, with a exclamation point and 2 question marks. But I'll start with the lack of the first baseman. I think as we stand right now, the Pittsburgh Pirates have 2 first baseman options on their roster. You have Jared Triolo and you have Connor Joe. Now, if you teach Henry Davis how to play the position, I think it's a position that Henry Davis could really, really, really play well, because I think defensively as a catcher, he has a lot to be desired. He obviously has a lot to be desired as a defensive outfielder, but I do think first base would be a quite easy position for him to learn throughout an entire offseason, and you want his bat in the lineup considering you spent a number 1 overall pick on the guy not even 2 years ago. Well, a little over 2 years ago at this point. But I do think it's something that he could really, really figure out. It's a position that I would also expect him to move over to if catching doesn't work out for him, because I think we've seen enough already from what he can offer in right field. And yeah, I mean, there's a lack of a steady right fielder as well for the same reason. Do you want Joshua Palacios to be your everyday right fielder? He's great in the clutch. He was phenomenal in the final 3 innings, batting average-wise and OPS-wise this year. But is he a guy that you really want playing 150 games of right field for you every single day? So I think right field is also another thing that the Pirates also have to be worried about. It's something that they really have to hunker down on. And there's clear needs on this roster. As I've said, since the season ended, throughout the season, there are clear needs on this roster, and the Pirates are going to have to be the ones to go and fix some of these clear needs. Do they consider right field a clear need? That is a very big question for this team. Obviously, first base is a need. It's been a need for quite some time now since the departure of Josh Bell to the Washington Nationals. So you look at all of these things, Donna, and I really think that when you boil it down, they are obviously going to try to fix these things in a very hearty way, but it really, really, truly depends on just how well they want to do it. Do they want to go out and spend a little bit more money than we're accustomed to with the Pittsburgh Pirates, or do they just usually do business as usual? Is that what they decide they want to do? We'll answer some more of your questions that you brought from Twitter. And if you're in the live stream, ask questions as well, because I'm here to answer them. But before we get into more of those, folks, I want to talk to you guys about FanDuel. FanDuel Sportsbook, of course, is your one-stop shop for all of your sports betting this NFL season. And we're about halfway through the NFL season, a little over half, depending on how many games your team has played and if they've had a bye week or not. But you can score early this NFL season with FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. Right now, new customers get $150 in bonus bets with any winning $5 moneyline bet. That's $150 if your team wins. And if you've been thinking about joining FanDuel, there's no better time to get in on the action. The app is super easy to use, and there's a wide range of betting options, including spreads, player props, over-unders, and more. So visit FanDuel.com/lockedon and kick off the NFL season, the second half of the NFL season, with FanDuel, an official partner of the NFL and an official sponsor of the Locked On Podcast Network. Alrighty, everybody. And again, thank you so much for tuning into this live episode of Locked On Pirates, where I'm answering some of your questions about the offseason. My name is Ethan Smith. You can follow me again right there on Twitter at MVP_Ethan. As for the next 2 episodes for this week, we're going to be still looking at some rumors. We're going to be looking at some things that maybe MLB trade rumors said about the Pittsburgh Pirates and some players that they could be targeting. And we're also just going to continue to talk about the Pittsburgh Pirates. And by the way, Tomorrow is the last day that you can vote for Ke'Bryan Hayes to win the Platinum Glove. Here's your reminder. You're getting another reminder tomorrow to make sure that you go bet for Ke'Bryan Hayes to win the Platinum Glove. The link is everywhere. I'll probably even put the link in the description of this show to ensure that you guys are voting for our third baseman to win the Platinum Glove. F. Stover comes in with a question. What would be your prediction for the number of wins in 2024 for the Pirates pre-free agency and trades? Adds a little LOL at the end. Well, Stover, if they were to do absolutely nothing, which we know is not going to happen, you look up and down the roster of players that are going to eventually come back and make an impact on this team. I think you can clearly say that a guy like Mike Burrows is probably going to make an impact on this roster at some point. You look at JT Brubaker, another guy that ultimately missed all of 2023 and will likely miss some of 2024 with an injury as well. You also look at some of the players that they would be bringing back. You would look at O'Neal Cruz, who didn't play for a large portion of this season. You look at Brian Reynolds, who's going to potentially have a elite 2024 campaign. Ke'Bryan Hayes is getting 1 year better. Jack Sawinski would be getting 1 year better. Henry Davis and Eddie Rodriguez would have full seasons under their belt if they stay healthy going into 2024. Now, this is all pre-free agency and trades. I think the biggest issue that you would have pre-free agency and trades, which is something that we all expect them to fix, is the starting pitching staff. You look at Mitch Keller and Johan Oviedo, pencil them in. They're going to be in the rotation. When does Paul Skeens join the rotation? I think that's one of the biggest questions that the Pirates are going to have, but you can't wait for Paul Skeens to just take a spot. You need him to force himself into the rotation at some point come June or July with a strong minor league campaign. So then you're working with Luis Ortiz, who had a lot of his struggles this year. You look at Roansy Contreras, who had massive struggles this year. Jared Jones will eventually push for a rotation spot. You look at other guys like Anthony Solometo, who could potentially make a massive leap in 2024. They won 76 games despite a lot of their issues, Stover, in 2023. If you were to tell me that O'Neal Cruz and JT Brubaker and Paul Skeens and Jared Jones and Mike Burrows and all these guys could collectively come together and build something without even doing anything in free agency, which we know they're going to, pre-free agency and trades, I would bump that up about 3 or 4 games. I'd say they probably win about 80, but obviously I think they do need some push from free agency or trades. They need some kind of push to put them to my eventual prediction, which I will not say yet because that will be for down the line. Cordy Quaglietta, hopefully I pronounced your last name right there, boss man. Could Frenchie Cordero be a fit to platoon between first base and right field? A change of scenery may help bring him back to his 2022 form, where he looked to be a force to be reckoned with. 219 batting average, 8 home runs, and 29 RBIs, arguably his best year in the majors, and he could increase those numbers in Pittsburgh. So Frenchie Cordero, not a name that a lot of people would really think about right off the bat for the Pittsburgh Pirates, but he does have experience playing the right field position and does pretty well at doing so. He could move between first base and right field pretty easily. The average, I think, is one of the more scary parts of it, considering you already have a guy in the lineup in Jack Sawinski, who's also a pretty big issue at times when it comes to certain things. I do think that when you look at Frenchie Cordero, it's something that I think the Pirates would consider, but also I wouldn't just stamp him in as the guy, even if he was signed. You know what I mean? I don't think he would be the answer to all of their problems. I think they would have to still go find a right fielder or find a first baseman, because when you're talking about him platooning there, is he platooning with Jared Triolo and Joshua Palacios? I don't know how confident I am in a Joshua Palacios and Jared Triolo and Frenchie Cordero platoon between right field and first base. But I've seen the Pirates done weirder with players. Like we remember Corey Dickerson coming here in free agency and ended up winning a Gold Glove with the Pittsburgh Pirates. So you never really know what's going to happen with this team. And I'll take a further look at Cordero in my free time and see if there's anything I can find. Matthew Marinchak says, if Roansy Contreras will be traded after his rough year, I don't think that the Pirates would hit the panic button on a guy like Roansy Contreras that quickly. I do think they're going to do their due diligence with Roansy throughout the 2023 campaign. And I do think it's something that the Pirates are going to keep a close watch on, because Roansy had some success, folks, whenever he was on his game and really doing well for the Pittsburgh Pirates. But I do think that you have to really boil it down to, can Roansy get back to his normal self? Can he be a good back end of the rotation option for this team? Can he even elevate himself back up to a potential third option in the rotation? These are all things that we've seen Roansy Contreras do. And a lot of what that trade was built on for Jameson Taillon is built on how good Roansy Contreras can be. Now, as far as trading him, now, if it ends up getting you something that can help you win now, that's where you kind of get me a little more intrigued, because if somebody is willing to take Roansy, build him through their minor league system, and maybe he can turn it out elsewhere, while the Pirates also get a known commodity, be that a first baseman, be that a starting pitcher, be that a relief pitcher, be that a second baseman, whatever you want, I would be open to it. But it also really depends on what player it is. Now, I'm not just trading Roansy away for just anybody. That's not happening at all. But I do think ultimately that the Pittsburgh Pirates are going to do their due diligence with a guy like Roansy Contreras. They're going to make sure that he's taken care of, and they're going to make sure that he is eventually going to get back to his regular self. Open Creation says, what do you realistically think the Pirates will get this year? Realistically, I know I'm like very, very heavy on the Eduardo Rodriguez deal. Sorry that I'm like stumbling over my words, just a little sick today. I would love them to get him, but I've been stuck now on Martin Perez as a major option for this team. We know they're going to get at least one starter. I would like to see them get multiple starters in the rotation to really shore up the rotation behind Keller and Oviedo, and eventually for Paul Skeens. We know they're probably going to go get a first baseman, be that Rhys Hoskins, be that Carlos Santana, be that Garrett Cooper, Brandon Belt, CJ Crone, any number of those guys. We know that's probably going to happen. There's the possibility that they go out and get an outfielder. It would not surprise me whatsoever, but I think that's a little bit further down their grocery list of things that they need. Second base is also a possibility. I know you have Leo Piguero, Nick Gonzalez, Jared Triolo, a lot of young guys there, but if there is an opportunity to get a known talent at second base, and you want to say you're going to be a competitive team in 2024, I think you do it. Jorge Polanco comes to mind. Gleyber Torres, if he does indeed get traded from the New York Yankees to the Pirates, pounce on that and eventually do something and figure it out. So realistically, I do think you're going to see a starting pitching signing, a first base signing, and an outfield signing. You'll probably see a bullpen signing as well. You maybe see a middle infield signing, just depending on what the Pirates decide they want to do with the middle infield. But at the end of the day, I think a lot of it boils down to how confident they are in their youth, how confident they continue to be in their youth, and how much money that they're willing to spend in free agency. I think all of that is realistic to speak about. And when you boil it down, I think it's something that the Pirates will continue to take a hard look at, because free agency is basically here, folks. We are on the precipice of the Pirates finally making moves and doing things, and we'll continue to answer some of your questions and talk Pirates offseason in just a moment. Alrighty, everybody, and welcome to the final segment of today's episode of Locked On Pirates here in the Locked On Podcast Network. Thank you all for always tuning into the show. For everybody that's joined the live stream, also thank you so much for joining this live stream. And now I'm just going to talk a little bit about the offseason, unless you guys have any other added questions that you'd like to ask. The Pirates offseason this year last year you looked at what they did. They signed or traded for G-Man Choi, signed Carlos Santana, signed Rich Hill, signed Vince Velasquez, signed Andrew McCutchen. They added a lot more than they subtracted last year. When you're going into this offseason, I don't think that sentiment needs to change. Now, what I'm saying now, it doesn't need to change necessarily in terms of what the Pirates are going to do. But if you are trading, you might be subtracting some players. You might subtract from a Nick Gonzalez if the deal is right. You might move on from other things as well. And Dave White comes in with a question during my rant. Have you heard the rumor here from Braves fans? Keller to the Braves for AJ Smith, Schreiber, and Hurston Waldrop. I don't think that'll happen just because I do think the Pirates are in a win scenario right now. They want to win in 2024. I don't think that deal is bad whatsoever. Now, if you can't get Keller extended, sure, do something and get something back for him. But as I've said on this show ad nauseum, I do think that the Pirates are going to try to get Mitch Keller extended. I think it's something that they're going to continue to work throughout the entire offseason because they have to. He is their ace. He is their anchor in the rotation, the engine that moves the train. And I think it's something that they have to do. But going back to it, folks, the Pirates are going to add players in the offseason. We know they are. There's no doubt in my mind that the Pittsburgh Pirates are going to add players in the offseason. Now, at one extent, though, are you okay with what they do? If they don't get Eduardo Rodriguez and Rhys Hoskins, but let's say they get Martin Perez and CJ Cron, are you guys mad about that? Because I'm not. I think CJ Cron is a very good first baseman option. And I think Martin Perez, as long as these are multi-year deals, by the way, as well, I think the days of the one-year deal, unless the Pirates find somebody that they see fit to help them win for 1 year, is fine. And realistically, when you boil all of it down, I do think that you have to get to the point for the Pittsburgh Pirates where it's time to add and it's time to win. I mean, this team has not made the playoffs since 2015. We've seen some very bad off seasons outside of last year. I think they did pretty well in the off season last year. And ultimately, folks, I think it's time for them to really ramp it up and do some good things. I have to head to work, folks, but thank you so much for tuning into this episode of Locked On Pirates. Hopefully, if you're listening, I answered your questions and all of that stuff. You can follow me on Twitter at MVP_Ethan or at Locked On Pirates. You can also follow this podcast on YouTube, Spotify, Odyssey, Google Play, or wherever you get your podcasts. Have a blessed rest of your Wednesday. I'll see you tomorrow. And with that said, I'll also see you guys on the flip side.